Today we are pitting a mid-range device against a flagship, and yeah, the only reason is that both of these two devices, they cost almost the same. Hi there people, how you doing? So, as I said before, this is the comparison between a flagship versus a mid-range device, and if you guys think that just because the OnePlus 8 Pro is a flagship is going to win and not even break a sweat when compared against the X50 Pro, then we all might be mistaken. But of course, the comparison will tell us the full story. So let's get started with the design. And at first glance, both of them look exceedingly good. I mean, matte finishes, they look really nice. And yeah, the only reason why I think that the OnePlus 8 Pro has a better design overall is because of the texture that we have on the OnePlus 8 Pro. And I've talked about this in the review of the X50 Pro as well, but the problem with the matte finish texture on the X50 Pro is that it attracts a crap load of fingerprints. I don't know why, but it just does. So yeah, for that reason alone, I mean, we don't like a smudged up back, especially on a matte finish. It's almost sad to say. So for that reason, I'm going to hand the win to the OnePlus 8 Pro for design. Now, of course, since we are talking about design, well, the OnePlus 8 Pro, being a flagship, it has certain features that you won't be getting in a mid-range device. One of the kind of important ones being the IP68 water and dust resistance, and yeah, to some people it's going to be very important because, let's face it, if you drop the X50 Pro in a swimming pool maybe, then you're going to have a very hard time, while the OnePlus, it'll just survive and, you won't have to worry about it. Now, OnePlus does have another very exclusive feature. It's a hardware feature. It's the alert slider, and I can tell you, and it stands for almost every OnePlus user. If they have, or if you have used a OnePlus device, then the moment you switch over to any other Android device, then you're gonna feel the loss of the alert slider. But yes, design is definitely a win for the OnePlus 8 Pro because it's got a non-fingerprinty back, and it's got other stuff like IP68 water and dust resistance and the alert slider, of course. But what about the displays? Yeah, let's face it, this is a flagship. It's got a flagship level display, and that actually means quite a lot because apparently the OnePlus 8 Pro has easily one of the best displays that I've ever looked at in a smartphone. It's got a 1440p, 120Hz, 10-bit color display, so basically it has all the bells and whistles that you could ask for in 2020. While the X50 Pro, although not flagship level, it's still a good display. It's 1080p, 90Hz, and no 10-bit color. It's got 8-bit. And yeah, it's a good display. It looks good and it's smooth enough for with 90Hz. It's sharp enough with 1080p, but if you really want the best viewing experience, then yeah, the OnePlus 8 Pro is something that you can never go wrong with. It's basically about everything. But of course, the one region where the X50 Pro truly shines like above almost any other mid-range device that I've ever even seen is the cameras. And of course, you might be thinking that's mostly because it's got the unique gimbal stabilization system. That's not the whole story because apparently not just the gimbal, but also the software processing, the HDR processing, it's fantastic on this device. And even though the OnePlus 8 Pro has a much larger, newer 48 megapixel sensor than we have on the X50 Pro, well, I can definitely say that images and video, everything basically turns out much better than the OnePlus 8 Pro. Barring slow motion, of course, because on the X50 Pro we have 1080p at 120Hz, while the OnePlus 8 Pro, having a powerful chipset, it can do 1080p at 240Hz. So other than that, I can definitely tell you in almost every other way, and I've done my camera comparisons, my video comparisons, everything, it's all out there. And yeah, I just have to admit that the X50 Pro most definitely does a far better job. Of course, there are places to improve. The consistency with image processing, the ultra-wide camera, especially in terms of video, those are places that definitely could use some really nice improvements, but overall, still, I personally most definitely recommend the X50 Pro for cameras because it's just goddamn amazing. And that gimbal stabilization system is, of course, a feature that you're going to find in no other phone. It's it's impressive in video. It is very impressive, but in night mode, even more so because apparently, with a gimbal stabilization system, you don't have to worry about holding your phone for way too long. It just does the work for you. That stability with holding the phone for 4 to 5 seconds, it can get kind of tedious. And the OnePlus 8 Pro, it almost doesn't even bother taking such long exposures. On this one over here, it does that on a regular basis and it's very easy to capture. So, yeah, even night mode is just freaking amazing. It's as good as what we have in the higher tier and $1,200, $1,300 flagships like the S20 Plus. I did compare the X50 Pro with the S20, so it did turn out to be almost a tie. So I think you guys can understand why I like this camera so much. Alright, enough about those cameras. Now let's talk about battery life and performance. And let's start off with the battery life because honestly, there's not a lot to talk about in terms of battery life. It's great on both. The X50 Pro has very power efficient chipset and it's got a very large 4315 I think milliamp hour battery, and the OnePlus 8 Pro on the other hand, it has a 4500 milliamp hour battery along with very good software optimization for battery life. So overall I'd say you can easily get between 5 to 6 hours of screen on time. That is amazing and obviously very impressive. I can tell you, you will obviously not be disappointed with battery life when it comes to either of these two devices. But when it comes to performance, there things will differ because the X50 Pro is a mid-range device and the primary difference is in performance, the chipset they use. We have a Snapdragon 765G processor on the X50 Pro, while the OnePlus 8 Pro being a flagship, it has a Snapdragon 865, and that makes quite a lot of difference as I've seen. Of course, both of these two do support 5G. If you live in an area where it supports 5G, so good for you. Not here though, but the performance is something to be wary about. And day-to-day tasks like WhatsApp, text, scrolling through the Instagram feed, Twitter, and stuff like streaming Netflix, YouTube, calling people, all of those, yeah, you won't notice any difference in the 765G with the X50 Pro. But when you go to heavy applications like photo editing, maybe if you want to edit a video, I don't know why you do that on a phone, but if you want to do that, if it fancies you. But yeah, and of course, we know 3D games. Those places are where you will most definitely see a difference between a mid-range chipset versus a flagship level. Basically, one of the fastest chipsets that we have on the OnePlus 8 Pro. And yeah, it really depends on the person, in my opinion, because I personally only noticed difference when I was editing a few large photographs on the X50 Pro. Every other time, for every other task that I had with the phone, I didn't notice anything. I didn't even feel like I was using a slower device because technically it is slower on this one, but having a relatively high refresh rate display and basically a good enough processor with a light software, it all ties in together to give a very pleasing experience overall. So unless you require the performance of an 865, I'd say you wouldn't exactly have any problems with a mid-range device. Now, of course, tying together with performance, we also have the software and how well optimized it is for both of them. I think that both of these two have one of the cleanest and, one of the most customizable softwares. The X50 Pro does come out on top in terms of customization because, man, just the animations, customizations, it's crazy how much we have on the X50 Pro. I mean, the OnePlus 8 Pro, it's good, but it still doesn't even come close to the X50 Pro. And I had thought that, yeah, having such a load of customization and I myself being crazy about customization, I would have definitely picked it because customizations are good, but there is another and slightly bigger reason why I prefer the software on the X50 Pro. It's the always on display. And I don't know why the always on display is not included in the OnePlus 8 Pro. It's weird, and I have no idea. I really don't. But on the X50 Pro, it works very well. It's easily one of the best, most customizable, most beautiful looking always on display that I've seen. And it's right up there with the Samsung Galaxies, and that's a really good thing. But of course, we cannot overlook the fact that the OnePlus 8 Pro is a flagship. It has certain features that flagships do. And, well, first and foremost of which is the stereo speakers. And that is, in my opinion, it is one of the more important things for me personally, because I stream a lot of Netflix on my phone, and that kind of makes it, sometimes it feels annoying that I have to wear earphones or headphones to stream on the X50 Pro. Because let's face it, once you've heard a good stereo speaker, it really makes it hard for the person to go back to mono speakers. I mean, after a while, I felt like I was deaf in one ear. And of course, we have wireless charging on the OnePlus 8 Pro. It's a first on a OnePlus device. And best of all, we have 30 watts worth of wireless charging. It's super fast, as long as you can shell out the extra cash to buy their wireless charger. It's proprietary and works in its own way. I won't get into the technicalities, but yeah, this one has really good, almost one of the best in the world wireless charging out there. The X50 Pro, on the other hand, doesn't even have it. And of course, after this full comparison, it even comes to my mind, why should someone buy the X50 Pro when they can get a full-fledged flagship for basically the same price? Almost the same price, a little bit more expensive on this one. But yeah, basically the same. Why should someone go for a mid-range device? Well, basically this is not for everyone. I can tell you that much, because I love cameras. I love it when I have an amazing camera, especially for a lower price tag. And the X50 Pro is basically the perfect candidate for that kind of a camera. It works amazingly well, as I've said numerous times before. And yeah, it also is actually better than the OnePlus 8 Pro's camera, in my opinion, of course. But I think that the X50 Pro is for those who care about cameras more than anything else. I mean, yeah, sure, you'll be getting a great device overall. Software is awesome. The display is really good for a mid-range device. I don't think you'll have any issues as such with the phone, but of course you won't be getting the flagship features that you do with the OnePlus 8 Pro. And yeah, to that extent, I think that the Vivo X50 Pro is for those who obviously love their cameras. They want the best camera for a lower price tag. The OnePlus 8 Pro, on the other hand, is a much more complete package that you can get. And yeah, in a few ways easily, the OnePlus 8 Pro does beat out the X50 Pro. It has the extra features that almost every single flagship has. Of course, it also lacks in some places, like always on display. I don't know why it doesn't have it. But anywho, I think that for a normal person who doesn't care that much about cameras or isn't inclined towards their cameras as their first priority, they'll enjoy the OnePlus 8 Pro more, because let's face it, the content consumption, HDR, all of that stuff put together, it obviously makes the OnePlus 8 Pro a much better phone, a smartphone. But the Vivo X50 Pro is for those, again, who love cameras, and my comparisons are basically proof of that. So that is it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, do that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will be seeing you guys later. Cheers.